Thanks very much. Thank you, Jael. And it's fantastic to be here on behalf of Ireland today. The Deputy Prime Minister was here last year, and I'm here this year. I'm Minister for Financial Services. And across Europe, I think I'm the only Minister for FinTech and financial services. So it's fantastic to be at the Singapore FinTech Festival with you. And actually, we were thinking about how close Ireland and Singapore are and how many similarities. Let me tell you a little bit about Ireland financial services and technology sector. And you'll wonder, am I speaking about Ireland or am I speaking about Singapore? Ireland is a member of the European Union now for 50 years. We have a part of the single market for 30 years, of course, a similar age to Singapore. But we have 20 out of the world's top 25 financial services firms based in Ireland. We have 17 of the top 20 banks globally, JP Morgan, BNP, Deutsche. We have 11 of the top 15 insurance companies. And we have, if you believe this, 50% of the world's airplanes are either leased or managed through Dublin. And I think you would believe that here in Singapore, where you're hot competitors for that number also. But very, very similar. And there's a huge financial services sector in Dublin. But it's complemented uniquely by an extraordinary technology sector also based there. So we have had for many years Apple, Google, Meta, LinkedIn, Intel, major technology companies. And the confluence of both our financial services sector and our technology sector has meant that we've been this extraordinary ecosystem for FinTech. And we're so delighted to see so many of our companies performing so well here at the FinTech conference today. It's wonderful to be able to have, in this context, a regulatory conversation. I mean, we cannot do this work without respecting the place of regulators and understanding how policymakers and regulators can make access to FinTech easier, how we can have better financial inclusion, how we're going to bring the services that you're driving and developing to people in a safe and very quick and very effective way. So the regulatory conversation has to be at the centre of what we're doing. But Ireland and Singapore look at this in so many ways very similarly. We're both small jurisdictions, completely open to the world, completely ready to have globally leading conversations about how to get services to people very quickly. We're both very pro-business, strong, open economies. But Ireland, at the centre of Europe, has a strong policy-making focus for the complete Eurozone, the complete Euro bloc area. And we are at the centre of the files on terms of retail investment, how we're going to enable citizens to be able to access wealth management and wealth development services, how we're going to integrate the European Union's capital market union in a much more significant way, and where the individual is going to be within that. And so much of what you're trying to do is bring financial services to the individual in the most efficient way. So we're very pleased to be here and have a presence here today. Very pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you all. Would love to chat to you individually, and I'm delighted to be part of this panel on the regulatory side. Thank you so much.
So please join us at the second seat from the left. And with that, I would like to invite Joanne and the rest of the panel on stage as well.
Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to see you. We really appreciate you all joining us for this conversation on inclusive policy frameworks as we look at the changes in FinTech. I'm Joanne Barefoot. Jael has introduced us, so I won't repeat the introduction fully, but we have a wonderful panel here of regulators, people working in the regulatory realm, and central bankers, and we're going to talk about this really issue that's at the core of the Singapore FinTech Festival, which is how are we going to enable inclusive finance? How are we going to create opportunity? I want to begin by talking about the fact that as we're now 10 to 15 years maybe into FinTech innovation, we have seen the arc of hopefulness. We launched all of these innovations with a great deal of optimism that they were going to make everything work for everyone, bring everyone into the financial system. And we've made a lot of progress with that. More than 1 billion people have come into the system worldwide. I'd like to start by just asking what is most promising so far in the trends that we see from the industry itself. And I might start with you. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. And then, first of all, thank you for Mass and Elevandi for arranging this amazing global event. So, in terms of what we've seen in the past decade, I would say, in the area of inclusion and policy making that enhanced the adoption and usage of financial services. I think we've seen a lot when it comes to digitalization and which helped in turn bringing, as you mentioned in the introduction, millions of people to the financial sector. And coupled with state-of-the-art digital infrastructure that governments around the world have worked on, whether it's digital ID or others, this really helped accelerate adoption. And if we look at Saudi Arabia as an example, and with Vision 2030, and in one of its most important programs, which is called the Financial Development Program, announced in 2017, it's focused on that area specifically. And because of the importance of inclusion in raising the adoption and access to people, we're looking at millions of people that was included in the system, driven by digital. If I look at the statistics of financial inclusion of people who have access to accounts in Saudi in 2019, it was about 70-something percent, 73%, and today we are about 95%. We talk about millions of people opening accounts for the first time during COVID, leveraging digital ID, which included digital wallets, payments, remittance, and all of that really helped move the needle, increase the liquidity for banks and the deposits, increase the depth and breadth of these services.
And others, would you like to speak to this?
So, thank you. I think so. First of all, I would like to thank SFF and Elevandi for organizing this great event. I think it's a fantastic vibration out here. I mean, I think with a lot of innovative thought processes and ideas floating around. So, if I may say, what I would wish to say from India's experience is that I'd like to go back to COVID. When the entire economy was shut down, but the work had to still go on. There was this question of how to get financial support for the citizens reached out quickly. So at that time, I think only we realized that a good digital infrastructure can be a solution for even such a large problem. So in the last 7 years, the government had, as my good friend mentioned, I think had created bank accounts for nearly 500 million people, who have never accessed bank accounts in the last, say, maybe 75 years of our independence. And riding on 1.2 billion mobile phones and 1.2 billion biometric identities, I think the government was able to transfer $10 billion at the touch of a button because of the Aadhaar-enabled payment services that we had. So that brought the government to the realization that digital can be completely transformatory. So we believe that our experience with payment systems and with the universal payments interface, which is now transacting nearly about 47% of the global digital payment and transactions. And with new frameworks such as open networks for digital commerce, I think we should be able to transform both e-commerce, payments, credit, insurance, etc. with a sound digital infrastructure. So if every country can build up its own authorization stack, data sharing stack, I'm sure that I think even the people who are in the bottom of the pyramid, who have not been touched by financial services, can be plugged into the financial system.
So we have a wonderful cross-section of the world here. And how many regulators do we have in the audience? Show of hands. Good handful of regulators here. Good to see you. We wanted, see more hands are going up. I wanted home in on the question of what are the keys to creating policy frameworks that can allow these fintech innovations to flourish. We know that there can be a sort of a knife's edge where you certainly need to regulate these innovations, and at the same time you want to allow flowering of new ways of doing things. What would you point to as the keys? Sal, let me start with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad to present today whole Kazakhstan, the Singapore FinTech Festival. and thanks to Elevandi to inviting us. I represent Kazakh Post, is one of the most spreaded with 3,000 branches across Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is the 9th biggest country in the world. Of course, we have that challenge of, first of all, internet connection. Before going to digital services, we are working on providing digital connection, digital equality to people. So Kazakh Post's role in delivering this government inclusive policies in addressing social disparities and economic inequalities is very vital. So I would say there are 3 key main areas we're working on helping government and NGOs to kind of implement their inclusive policies. First of all is financial services. We provide whole-scale financial services to rural areas. About 7.5 million people work at the rural places, so villages. We bring cash sometimes because there is no internet, no access to mobile applications. So still, some people, they still use cash, or some disabled people will bring to home cash. So to make sure that they are economically active in the country. Secondly, about the capital market development, wealth management, we involve in the national government programs. Through Kazakh Post branches, they involved in investment, wealth management practices, so we do a lot of training programs. On the digital inclusivity program, because we have these scaled branches across the country, we're working with Starlink, for example, to give immediate access to people to the internet, by which we can provide all social and government services to our people. So by the end of next year, we hope to cover full Kazakhstan by most highly speeded internet provided by Starlink satellite internet. And thirdly, it's social economic, addressing social and economic delivery. So usually, traditionally, people think, oh, postal services, it's only postal services, but we're changing that. We're becoming, so at the village, it's school or either a postal service branch. So we're changing our model to be a community. They create economic creative center. So by providing not only postal services, financial services, telemedicine, educational services, also all the government programs like subsidizing, giving grants to the entrepreneurs and businesses are done through Kazakh Post branches. And the final, let's say, for the creative economy, we're helping businesses to buy and sell online. So involving businesses through our infrastructure to to be economically active. So let's say it's from the implementation perspective, the key challenges is how we deliver that policies that regulators define and state, and it's multi-partner programs that has to be done in the country level, and that has to be synchronized. So we citizen-centric policies is very important. So Kazakh Post as a superconductor connecting governments and people, connecting cities with rural places is a very important role to delivering that policies. Thank you.
Did you want to jump?
Yeah, we're at a different stage of development, but obviously in Europe, the Irish Central Bank is a very, very strong regulator. That's why we have as many financial services firms. They want to be regulated in Ireland because it's such a high standard. But that's led to a challenge with developing our InsurTech, RegTech. And just this week we've announced now, the Central Bank has announced taking an innovation sandbox, really leaning into that. We've had an innovation hub with the Central Bank since 2018, and we've seen that foster really strong. We've two of our compliance companies here, KYC and MCO, which are big compliance companies. So, but we're seeing how regulators can partner with industry, partner with government to try out new pieces. And again, we're going to establish a dedicated fintech hub, and we'll make sure that we have a central bank presence as well there to be able to start those conversations at the earliest stage about how you can get regulated and the most efficient pathways to that. Because let's face it, for a startup, it's a really expensive, complicated, distant process, and you've got to make that a little bit more seamless if we're going to get the benefit of the innovation that's possible.
And the other thing that's valuable about sandboxes, I think, is that they give the regulator hands-on experience, which is not, I'm a former bank regulator myself in the United States. It's not always easy to do. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I agree with Minister MacNeill about the need for, effective regulatory framework, as well as the kind of, the importance of private-public partnership in promoting fintech. But let me point out more things, which is I think fintech could play a very significant role in improving the cross-border payments around the world. Particularly, I participate in the discussion at the G20 and the FSB, Financial Stability Board, with regard to improving the cross-border payments. And one of the issues we have had is the cost and the speed of cross-border payments. That creates a significant impediments in terms of free flow of capital and the ease of sending remittances for workers from developing countries to their home. So I think in these areas, fintech can play a significant role in improving the things. In Japan, there is no severe kind of problem of financial exclusion because almost every citizen can access the banking services at ease. But as a country with a shrinking population, we do need to invite foreign workers to work in Japan. But cost associated with remittances is becoming a serious problem for us. So in that context, we are kind of are making efforts to make the regulatory framework technology neutral, entity neutral, in the sense that to ensure that level playing field is in place between the incumbent banks and fintech companies or money transmitters using advanced technologies.
Let's turn to talking a bit about AI. That seems to be the topic of the conference this year here. And it's a double-edged sword, very much. I think we see amazing opportunity in using AI for financial inclusion and consumer protection, but also a lot of worries about how it could make life worse for the consumer. Tell us about how you're thinking about the role of AI going forward.
It's AI. I think like many other new technologies, it's just evolving. I think as more and more use cases emerge and the market realizes the value and the customers also realize the value. So one of the, if you look at India, I think in some of the use cases where AI has really worked well, like for instance, customer management, I think it's very important, I think, because things like robotic process automation, chatbots, those kind of things actually reduce the barriers for customers to understand products and also to work with the financial system. So I think those are like, the low-hanging fruits that people can use. Similarly, I think there are some applications related to fraud management, for instance, I think, because this is something the financial sector entities always have to contend with. So use of AI to identify risks with potential customers or a potential transaction. This is something which I think is also a very low-hanging fruit, because this is something very managing the integrity of the system is very fundamental to the financial sector. So similarly, I think another emerging area where, as a regulator, I can say that RegTech is a very important, as the minister just mentioned. RegTech is something which we are currently working with. In fact, the International Financial Service Center in Gift City, Gujarat, we are now in the process of setting up a supervisory technology solution. So while many of our entities have RegTech solutions, I think we are building a supervisory tech solution to use data to ensure that we have better surveillance and better market conduct and so on and so forth. So I guess the uses of applications of AI is huge. I think, of course, AI is not without its difficulties as well. I think, like for instance, if used in areas like financial advice, there could be potential abuse. So I think, so therefore, as a regulator, I think there are challenges as well. So managed and properly regulated use of AI in the financial markets is very, very important.
Anyone else on AI?
Yes, as a bank, we actually use AI, as my colleague said, for the customer management solutions, as well as on the security side, on AML, securing our cash machines, whole infrastructure. We use AI technologies to detect at the real time. Obviously, we expect from the regulators that there will be some kind of framework, because we think about the personal data protection, where sometimes the new technologies around AI, they tend to be biased, that are tested on a man but not a woman. So there could be some biased models that I think it's at the initial stage, and we're helping to be a test bed on the small sandboxes, RegTech sandboxes, to help to collect and learn on our data to help regulators to improve and set up right frameworks to work within it. So it's, that's under the rights of customer protection, I think is very important.
We're very focused on AI as a tool to combat money laundering, and I think it's a key theme for everybody at the moment, key theme of this conference. In Europe, we're establishing an anti-money laundering authority, which Dublin is competing for, but a big focus of that is how we can use AI to sort of stem that off and protect people from that horrible financial crime.
Building on the AI conversation, I think something that people are increasingly appreciating is that the rapid improvement in financial inclusion over the last decade or two has created tremendous challenges with consumer protection. We have, again, over 1 billion people have come into the formal financial system for the first time. Many of them find themselves exploited, fraud is common, and so on. When you think about the policy frameworks for consumer protection, many possibilities are on the table, open banking, and so on. Deb, would you like to speak to, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, sure. It's a very important subject because, as you mentioned, millions have been included in the financial sector, and with different, let's say, demographics, different education levels, and that brings with it its own challenges. And I think as a central bank and of a growing economy, I think we're looking at it from multiple lenses. First is the focus on the consumer protection in terms of transparency. And we look at it from 3 angles. First is the access of products and services, and the information around it is very transparent. The usage is clear, and the quality itself of these products and services are provided. They are up to the consumer expectations. So in terms of the role that the regulators and central banks play, I think with the lens of financial literacy and having clear KPIs and looking at where the consumers are when it comes to understanding their rights from one angle, and from the other angle is making sure that the competition between players is transparent and clear enough so that the consumers, as they expand their access, because as you mentioned, these millions of consumers, when they first access the financial sector, it's just basic bank account and maybe a payment account. But while their needs are growing, they will get loans, they will get access to credit, and that makes it even more important. So how to gradually take these consumers on the food chain of financial services and making sure that they understand their rights is very important. And I think regulators are working hard on that, and there are different frameworks, whether it's in using technology and making it easier for consumers. Although that might also be a downside of how seamless these services are and quick to adopt. That brings it with solution, but challenges. So I think it's looking at the angles of literacy, education, and regulation and enforcement on these financial institutions, and having I always access to the voice of what's happening on the ground as well, because we could really, with how quickly now products are developed and adopted, you could trap yourself in certain products or certain players really abusing sometimes, and it could happen in a mass and very quickly. That's I think that's the theme of today's world.
So, like others say that it is very important to, for example, raise the digital literacy of the consumer. I think it should be part of the comprehensive approach to protecting consumer interest. Also, a greater use of AIs and other advanced technologies would require an elevated level of very digital-specific sort of governance and internal controls in place. So, very important thing is for each kind of entities to put in place an effective governance framework, internal control, in order to prevent these sort of things, including check and balances between departments and some. Also, that will require also sufficient human resources with sufficient expertise to prevent these sort of scams and abuse of these things. So risk management framework, governance, and literacy on the part of users would be a kind of a part of the comprehensive approach to that.
Do any of you think that we may get to the point where we're using AI as an individual, personal, financial helper to the consumer, through which they could protect themselves better than they may be able to do today? I've spent my whole life working with financial education and financial literacy, and we need to drive for that. But I asked myself, how are we really going to expect a consumer who's already in an asymmetrical knowledge relationship with the provider to protect themselves potentially from being attacked by AI threats?
Well, we're already, it seems, happy to allow, was it flinfluencers? How do you say that word? On Instagram, providing financial advice to people and understanding the impact of that. I think from our perspective in Europe, obviously there's a new retail investment strategy, and it's about building trust. And it's about building trust for retail investors to be able to safely invest in moderate ways that's going to enable them to build wealth, help avoid pension poverty, particularly for women who have been less inclined to do that and who suffer more on a gender basis. But how to build trust, and how do companies provide products that are accessible, easily understood, have lower fees, and can build confidence in that sort of strategy over time. But if you can have influencers on Instagram giving you financial advice, I don't know whether that's better or worse than than AI, than a robot. I genuinely don't know the answer to that. But I think the solution to it is organizations proactively providing products that are low fees, safe, trusted products that people can really begin to understand financial, their own wealth development over time.
So let's stay on the gender topic for a moment. One of the concerns I know that's been talked about here at the conference is the fact that many governments are very focused on gender opportunity and finance and everything else, but the data usually are not disaggregated by gender. And so Women's World Banking, for example, is here and has been talking about the fact that it's hard to know how well women are being served because we don't see it in the data. We also hear so much about the fact that products tend to be designed for men. Let me come back to you on this, and I'd welcome others as well. What are the policy frameworks for gender inclusion?
Well, I mean, it's about acknowledging it first and acknowledging that women do treat investments differently and they do treat their financial futures differently, often to their own detriment, and it's how to overcome that. But this was a focus of, so in Europe every month, the European finance ministers meet together at the ECOFIN, the Eurogroup meetings, and this was a key theme. You had Christine Lagarde from the European Central Bank asking the Norwegian, the major sovereign wealth fund, how do you invest from a gender perspective and how are you understanding that? And they are looking at the composition of boards and the thoughts on that side of things. But as we develop our policy on a European basis, how do we understand the impact, the practical impact? So myself, the Swedish, the Luxembourg finance ministers, all women, all trying to think about how is it that we're going to have practical products that women can comfortably invest in and really develop their own wealth over time. So I think we have to think about it constantly. But like everything else, whether it's women's participation in politics, in my own field, or in financial services where they are consistently underrepresented, we have to stop trying to fit them into a mold that already exists and really genuinely design products that actually work for half the population of the world and are more suited for half the population of the world. We're really conscious of this in Ireland. We're trying to make sure that there are more women at senior levels of financial organisations. Huge number, 70 of the organisations in Ireland have signed up to transparency in their organisations, women at every level of financial services organisations, to try to make sure that women are getting through that difficult pathway past when they have children and making to the top. I'm a finance minister, one of a handful in Europe that are female, but you've really got to show at every part in finance, whether it's from political level, the regulatory level, at the top of all of the organisations, that women are being conceived and thought of as we design products that are going to help them develop their wealth and prevent their own poverty.
My organization did a project last year with the Reserve Bank of India's Innovation Hub on women's economic empowerment. And one thing that stood out for me that I took away from it was one of the experts said, when you design financial products for women, they'll work for everyone. But if you design financial products for men, they may not work for women.
We see this on data generally, disaggregating gender and data. I mean, we see it with safety belts. We see it with the testing of medicines. You know, we have not been coming to things in an equal way in terms of testing a whole range of products. And there's something that very different that has to change about that.
Let's talk about regulator capacity and regulator challenges. Again, I'm a former bank regulator. None of us have ever seen change happening this fast before. The technology is changing at lightning speed. I love regulators. My son became a regulator. Never criticized regulators. But the fact is that regulatory bodies are designed to be conservative and risk averse and careful. That's what we want from them, right? That's what their cultures are. How are we going to equip regulators to keep up with the speed of change, the ability to bring in all the data that is needed today, the ability to use AI on it? Let me go to you.
Oh, okay. I think we have been facing the severe challenges in terms of hiring very good people with expertise from the technology sector, partly because you can earn a lot more money than in the public sector. That is a fundamental problem. But with that kind of constraint, we have been trying to have a very close dialogue with the private sector in terms of improving our regulatory and supervisory framework. And so I think holding close dialogue with the industry sector is one of the best ways to do that. And in addition to that, we have been exploring kind of collaboration with the academia, like universities, and sending some of our staff to the graduate schools and other kind of technical expertise scholarship. Also, we are in cooperation with the Bank of Japan in sophisticating our data processing framework so that we can analyze granular sort of lending data provided by financial institutions in an automatic manner.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I know that. I think with the, as you said, the fast pace of change that's happening around us, and the speed of product development and adoption, and the competition and how fierce it is, I think the regulators around the world are changing how they think their positioning is in terms of this wave. We traditionally were focused on regulation, supervision, and enforcement. I think now more and more regulators, and maybe MAS here is a very good example, is finding ourselves becoming a facilitator of change and an enabler for change. How to do public-private partnerships, how to enable the private sector to go and address certain challenges of the economy. I don't think we could develop solutions and cook it and then present it to the economy anymore. I think the dynamics of the economy, the dynamics of change, the interconnectedness of the economies nowadays in terms of innovation and how a new business model in financial services crops up in Australia and a year later it's all over the world. So as an example, so these things really positions ourselves as regulator in a different way. So to embrace this facilitator and enabler role does require for upskilling your workforce, maybe having, as mentioned, new kind of, or re-looking how training and development happens inside, and embracing this dialogue with the stakeholders, whether it's financial sector players, whether they are other regulators, or even other governments in some sense.
I feel we need much more collaboration, including between regulators and industry, which can be challenging because it's a somewhat adversarial relationship, but it also has to be a collaborative one. Do you have further thoughts on this, the regulatory capacity?
So, I was just discussing with my chief technical officer, I think Mr. Joseph Joshi, I think, so he was here several years ago as well. For the first time, I think we have a regulators zone here, right? I think, so which means that, I think regulators are getting interested into it, I think. So therefore, regulators feel that technology is a very important enabler. So at the same time, I think we also, let me also say from my organization, maybe 5 years back, I think nobody would have thought that we would need a chief technical officer. I think when a regulator doesn't really need them, I think. So today, I think, like MAS has got a chief fintech officer, we have a chief technical officer. So technology has become a very important vertical in regulation. So I think that learning has come, that technology is very, and especially from a country like India, technology has been a great enabler. So I think we need that as a basis. So therefore, there's no going back on it, I think. It's a question of now how we handle that and how we take it forward. So building, as my friend mentioned here, I think building up a strong band of competent resources within the organization is very important. So regulators have to hire from the market. I think, as he says, there is a challenge, compensation and so on and so forth. But there's no choice. I think we have to hire talent from the market. The other thing is that I think regulators need not know everything. But if there is a collaborative environment like a market advisory committee where wise people from the market sit and we listen to them, I think probably a lot of wisdom will emerge. I think regulation can emerge. The second part of it, which I would like to say, is that it's also important that we learn to experiment, because as many of us said, sandboxes are essential part of our system now. I think in our International Financial Center, we have an innovation sandbox for early stage companies and also a regulatory sandbox for late stage companies which can launch products. So I think the sandbox itself is an opportunity for the regulator to learn. I think we learn and look at it from a 360-degree viewpoint, as to what are the regulatory risks, what are the legal risks, what are the AML, CFT risks. And so I think I'm sure that these kind of things which are never heard of, I think are providing opportunities for regulators to become more enlightened than before, I think.
And what are the obstacles that make it difficult, or maybe it's not difficult to bring a regulatory agency to where you want it to be?
I would say that first of all, I think the mindset, of technology being an enabler, I think rather than a roadblock has to go. I think many regulators come from that mindset. The regulators were set up maybe 60 years back, some of them maybe 100 years back. So therefore, I guess they have a lot of baggage within the organization. So I think that has to be unlearned and probably junked for a moment. And while I say that, I think regulators should not be necessarily be adventurous in launching products which are untested in the market. But I guess opportunities to test in the form of a sandbox has provided the via media to actually to understand products and understand them before they actually go live. So I guess challenges, I would say it's more like a mindset problem rather than any real challenge, when I think. Yeah.
On a slightly different point, that's so true, because I mean we are creating a more and more regulated environment, particularly on ESG, and in Europe you've got the taxonomy, and you keep asking yourself, how are organizations going to get on top of this? And yet I've just seen software across there that's showing me how organizations can digitalize that and make that incredibly easy. So just as you say, we have these challenges, but actually it's a mindset. You can find solutions very quickly, and actually this is the best place for finding them, but it's amazing how quickly you can do that. And like in Ireland, we're so focused on ESG, we're the global leading hub for issuing ESG bonds, and yet our organizations have the same challenge everybody else has to make transitions. And I found the software over there.
You can find everything at
You can find everything here.
FinTech Festival.
If I may add on this point, I think also showing the value on terms of real value on economic linking these innovation, linking these digitalizations with real value. As I said, if you look at if regulators, when they celebrate the rise of financial inclusion, the rise of digital payments, and how these and do calculation and what does this mean on the economy, this helps remove that mindset of fear, because this could not happened without the embrace of fintech and technology. When you talk about digital payment and in terms of digital lending as well, we didn't talk about that, and how much these peer-to-peer platforms or lending platforms have created access to credit to a segment of society that couldn't have access to credit. So quantifying these value and celebrating them, I think help move us to the next chapter of innovation and adoption.
Talking about the mindset, I think the private sector people might want to kind of think about their mindset as well, so that do not see regulators as a kind of intruder to your business. Rather, you might want to think that regulators as well as your people, fintech companies are all living in the same ecosystem of fintech, so that we can improve by cooperating with each other together.
Maybe last 3 years, we noticed that all the regulators, they are willing to be innovative. They want to be technology lead regulators, but nevertheless, they are risk-based bodies. So it might take time to adapt to the new technology trends. So another obstacle, Joanne, you mentioned, I want to mention in our environment, our regulator sometimes is very innovative, but then all the policies, they have to be approved by the banks association. So what happens that banks, they tend to protect their ecosystem. They tend to protect traditional financial services, their environment, their clients, their data. So they're not allowing new fintechs coming to the business. So that kind of obstacles we see from the private sector. And it's one of the slowest process we're having. The years we are doing all the consultation with the private sector in order to implement some of the new products. So government, what they decided, they created second regulator. It's the second called Astana International Financial Center, which is based on the new fintech companies. For example, we allowed crypto, we allowed crowd financing. So new ways of implementing financial services is based with new regulators. So in that way, we can kind of enable new fintech companies to be in the business without kind of stopping whole economic development.
I'm going to add one quick thought to this. Regulators often talk about the fact that it's hard for them to attract tech talent into the public sector. There's a perception that government's bureaucratic and boring and so on. And for the tech people in the room, I would just say to you, these are really interesting tech problems. And I know tech people like interesting challenges. If you spend some time in the public sector and work on issues like financial inclusion and consumer protection and anti-money laundering to combat human trafficking, these are issues that matter, and there are really vast opportunities inside the government as well as outside. We only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask you very briefly just to come down the row and talk about if there's one thing that you hope this audience will remember from this conversation when they get back to work next week, or one key message that you would like to share, just in a sentence or two? What would that be?
I think it is very important, particularly in this fintech world, for regulators and the private sector people to collaborate with each other in order with the spirit of improving the ecosystem, as I said. So we would very much appreciate frank exchange of views and a flat kind of dialogue with the private sector, so that we could improve our regulatory and supervisory framework.
There is no limit to the innovation that we can all do, individually. But as policymakers and regulators, I think we'll have to look at, each of us come from different countries, and each country has got its own different set of problems. So we need to look at what is the biggest set of problems that are besetting your economy, I think. So can technology be applied to that to solve it? Can the regulator and the policymaker work together along with the market to see whether a solution can be delivered to that problem, I think. Like, for instance, India, I think financial inclusion was the biggest challenge. So I think we have applied ourselves to it, and I think we continue to apply it. I think it's a huge problem. So I think we need to identify those top 2-3 problems, I think, and then see how we can hack that problem through joint measures using technology.
Yes, I would emphasize again on the partnership that all the stakeholders, they need to be open, creative to the new technologies, because the technology is changing, so we have to be very adaptive to help people. So at the end, we're helping people. And another thing, what I would like to emphasize is we're talking about the level of each country level, but maybe we talk about the cross-border services to open up that borders to financial services. I think it's next level of discussion that financial institution regulations that need to talk about how we make sure that we give businesses access. So for Kazakhstani citizens, giving equality to get service from other countries. So it's next level of discussion I think we need to talk about.
I think shortly, regulators around the world, especially the leading ones, have really transformed now from just focusing on regulation, supervision, and enforcement to focusing on the facilitation and enabler law, and also cross-collaboration with international peers. And because, as was mentioned, there are domestic problems, but there are also global issues. And I'm happy to see that collaboration happen. And today's sessions and this hall that we're in is a clear example of that.
So what I would say is come to Ireland. We've got the best financial companies, the best technology companies. We're at the heart of European policy making and governance. We've got a great regulator. We're really close to the United Kingdom, really close to the United States, and we're at the front of everything that's happening in Europe. So come to Ireland and come and talk to us.
That's a great note to end on. Please join me in thanking our panel.